Not only could Houston Texans quarterback CJ Stroud break into the top 10 quarterbacks list this season, he should already be there. We got all of that and much more on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL, bringing you all the biggest stories from around the National Football League every day. It's Tuesday, so you've got Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL on your favorite social media. Myself, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola. And on today's episode, we're going to take a look at our yike and our like as we do every week, including T. Higgins getting exactly what it is that he was looking for. We'll dive into the Brock Purdy, Tagovailoa conversation a little bit in terms of which one of those guys could be or should already be considered a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. And we're going to lead off taking a look at our friends over at Locked On NFL Scouting, who ranked their top 10 quarterbacks on Monday, Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs. And we're going to dive into who we think could potentially break into that conversation over the course of the 2024 NFL season. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen here on the show and for making us and for being an everydayer here as well. Proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, Luke. So we have from our good friends Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs over at the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, which you can find every single Monday through Friday, wherever you get podcasts. National show. It kind of dives into team management, roster building, just deeper intricacies on what it takes to build a dynasty in the NFL. And they rank their top 10 quarterbacks for this, or going into this year. So we wanted to take a look at this list and then also try to take a look at potentially who some of those quarterbacks are that could break in over the course of the 2024 season. So shall we take a look at the top 10 as they have it established first?
Yeah. And we're not trying to argue with what this top 10 is. We're trying to kind of predict almost how it will change over the course of the season. There should be openings just based on the entropy of the NFL, right? Like some guys just aren't going to have the year that they had last year. But also, you got guys like Cousins and Stafford who are on the older end who might kind of fall away, even if they don't fall away a lot, just enough to get out of the top 10 and somebody else takes over and somebody's going to be a breakout. You have, like you teased, guys like CJ Stroud or even Anthony Richardson that could, have their breakout year and force their way onto this list. Or even, guys that are coming off a down year or something that could force their way in as well.
To start, we could take a look here with Patrick Mahomes, of course, being the number one guy. Josh Allen at number 2.
Yep.
Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals at 3. Matthew Stafford at 4, which is the highlight
spicy one
here because it's a spicy one. Lamar Jackson at 5.
Go ahead and argue with that in the YouTube comments.
Yeah, that's a big one.
You can do that for us.
Yeah, that's a big one. Then we've got Dak Prescott at 6 for the Dallas Cowboys, maybe higher than some folks might have considered. Justin Herbert of the Chargers at 7. Kirk Cousins at 8 from the Atlanta Falcons. Jared Goff of the Lions. And then at number 10, we got Jordan Love of the Packers. So for me, my big name going into this one is Houston Texans quarterback CJ Stroud. In fact, I believe, and I had a similar conversation with Alex Clancy over on another episode of Locked On NFL not too long ago, that CJ Stroud could already be considered a top 10 quarterback as far as I'm concerned. He was that good his rookie season, did it with, kind of weapons that maybe weren't like these top tier household name weapons, not to say that they weren't good weapons. Tank Dell, Nico Collins, all very good. Now he gets Stephon Diggs. Like he just feels like he's in an even better scenario here in 2024 to build off of the impressive start that he already had in 2023. But am I wrong to put a guy who's just 1 year in already into that top 10 conversation? Like, am I overreacting at this point?
I mean, yeah, sample size, there could be a chance that we're overreacting, but I think if that turns out to be wrong, because I'm with you, I'm with you and Clancy on that. Like, I think that he played like a top 10 quarterback last year because I think he elevated people around him. The Nico Collinses and Brown, what was his first name? Brown, the Noah Brown and and Tank Dell, and like those guys. I don't think that they have the seasons that they do without CJ Stroud playing the way that he did. It took him a little bit of time to get going, right? Which is rookie stuff to be expected, but he did find that kind of traction, and now you get a whole season of that. And so I think like back half of the season, CJ Stroud is like, there's a really good reason to believe that that's the CJ Stroud that we see. As compared to somebody like Jordan Love, who had a very similar trajectory, but it was year 4 for him. So it's a little bit easier to think, okay, well, like, it's not like you were just adjusting to the NFL. You're maybe adjusting to being a starter. Maybe that's the argument. So I see if CJ Stroud can just stay the course that he is on, let alone improve, I think he can kind of crack this list. He just does a lot of the stuff right, and he has the dynamic playmaking ability where he's not just about the boring stuff, mechanically being correct, the throwing motion is right, delivering the ball accurately and on time on, boring 2nd and 4 stick concepts.
Right.
But I think that stuff will carry him further than the improv stuff will. And the improv stuff is cool, and it will get him out of some jams, but doing all the boring stuff right, I think that's where the meat of his game is. And I really like that. I liked it when he was at Ohio State. I liked it at Houston, even when he was struggling. So I've been in CJ Stroud's corner pretty much since the day I learned about him.
Yeah, same. He was my QB1 that year. I still think the Carolina Panthers made the wrong decision going Bryce Young there, but I'm actually kind of glad that it happened for the Houston Texans, right? Like, what a great kind of turnout that's been. What a fantastic story.
Texans fans deserve a little success because their franchise has been unkind to them over the last decade.
Yeah, new America's team over there in Houston. They just migrated they just migrated a little bit south. The title there is all. So is there another player at all that stands out to you as a guy that could potentially break into the top 10 that's not currently on Kyle and Joe's top 10 list?
Yeah, we could have the discussion about Anthony Richardson. I think it's a way difficult prediction, and I'm going mostly off of my draft take, which who knows how right that ever is. Yeah, I did pretty good on all the other quarterbacks that year, right? So maybe I did. And he looked like he was kind of paying it out before he went down. You got to stay healthy. You got to do that. Yeah. But my really spicy one, people aren't going to like this, Geno Smith.
Interesting. That's not the spice I thought you were going to go for. Why?
I think Geno Smith has just developed into a very good quarterback with very little caveat about it. I think the caveat all pertains to who he was and not who he is. And I think that there's a lot, again, you've got an age thing. So he's not going to run around the same way that CJ Stroud can, and he shouldn't. But as just a clean, do it all right pocket passer, I think he occupies a sort of Kirk Cousins-ish territory in this world where, I think if Kirk Cousins does fall out, Geno would be the guy to replace him as just a guy that gets the ball where it needs to be with no frills. That's what I see with Geno Smith, a very workman-like quarterback that can move an offense with 3 smoking receivers and under a new Seahawks regime that might lean on him a little more. We'll see. I see a vision there in Seattle for something that can for an offense that can find success because it leans on Geno, not in spite of him, which is, I think, a lot of the narrative around Geno believes. That's where I'm at on Geno, I guess. I feel it.
Yeah, I like that. It's an interesting one, not one that I would have pegged. My other one that I just want to give a quick honorable mention to that I was kind of thinking about was Jalen Hurts, right? Philadelphia Eagles quarterback.
That was the other one. Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. A guy that I look at.
That's who I was thinking of when I said coming off a down year and might bounce back. Yeah.
Yep. That was exactly it. I feel like, reasonable to make the argument that he fell out of the top 10, but I don't think that it's a permanent fall out of the top 10. He very much is in the conversation as one of those guys that can go in. But I love the Geno Smith pick. I love some love for Geno. Let's take a look because we didn't talk about San Francisco 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy or Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. And that was on purpose, not because we're leaving him off the list, but because we think that they're kind of in a conversation of their own. So let's talk about the two of them and how they could potentially jump into this top 10 list as we continue on, or rather, if they could jump into this top 10 list as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by BetterHelp. If top 10 QB lists have you heated, maybe you need therapy. Check out BetterHelp, where you can get Set up with therapy that works for you and your schedule, whether that's video conferencing or calling, whether that means kind of trying out a therapist or two before you get somebody that really jives with you. BetterHelp can help you get set up with that. They'll try to hook you up with someone they think is right for you. But if you don't like it, no worries. You can switch at no additional charge. So go to betterhelp.com/lockedon and you can get 10% off of your first month. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get BetterHelp, to get 10% off of your first month with BetterHelp. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp.
All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to also go and check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream program to bring you the biggest stories from around the world of sports with the local experts that actually know the teams that are covering the big stories, none of the yelling and screaming and shouting that you might catch on some of those other networks. So go and check them out today over at Locked On Sports Today's YouTube page, as well as on the free Amazon TV channels app as well, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Luke, we're taking a look at the top 10 quarterbacks list that Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs from over at Locked On NFL Scouting put out, and two omissions from that top 10 list were San Francisco 49ers
suspiciously
quarterback.
not talked about yet.
Right. Brock Purdy, as well as Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, who, you're right, we've omitted from the conversation thus far, but I think it's because they deserve to sort of be in their own conversation. It's funny, the more and more kind of discourse around each of these guys. And obviously there's a lot of Tua discourse right now because of, do you give him an extension? Do you not give him an extension if you're Miami? A lot of it, when you hear about one of these guys, it's in comparison to the other one of these guys. Even when we featured Kurt Warner's comments a couple weeks back, he was talking about both of those guys as well, the ability to operate out of structure, all these other things. So I'll ask you, because I think that they could, but is 2024 a season here where either or Purdy or Tua could potentially jump into this top 10 quarterback conversation?
I think Tua kissed it last year. He
was close, right?
Just a little bit for a second, you know, there was a little where he was in that echelon where you expect him to be, especially if you're, you know, a Dolphins diehard who expects this guy to be the one that leads the Dolphins back into championship territory.
Sure.
He was there for a second with throwing deep shots to Tyreek Hill, and Tyreek Hill going up to, you know, sniffing 2K and all of that, Jalen Waddle, everything. That offense was humming, and then you've got health issues and all that. So you got to stay healthy, and he has to reclaim that and sustain it for the whole season. Yeah. We have seen what we need to see out of Tua. We just need to see it sustain. That's kind of where I'm at. And it's a much different thing than with Purdy, where Purdy, it's almost more narrative. Like, they did get to the Super Bowl, you know, other than win that one game. You know, Harrison Butker misses one field goal and we're having a totally different conversation about him.
Right. Which I'm sure he'd welcome at this point.
Yeah, right. But like with Purdy, there was more team success, but obviously the whole thing about him is how much is he driving it and how much is he getting driven by Kittle and McCaffrey and Debo and Ayuk and all that. So what we can't see from Purdy is that stretch in the middle of the season that San Francisco had where he fell apart and he started throwing picks. Again, it's consistency, right? Everybody can have that game where you throw near perfect passer rating. A lot of quarterbacks can have that game where they just like go off, they throw 3 touchdowns and it's a great one and they win by a bunch. How many of those can you have? That's what gets you comfortably onto this list. That's what brings you into that's why Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes aren't being discussed today, because we know that they have that game a lot. Even though Josh Allen had a couple of disasters last year, like you expect going in that he's going to be somebody that you have to put in a Herculean effort to stop him from just hanging 4 touchdowns on you. Yeah, you go into a game against Tua and you're like, well, yeah, maybe there's a world where he beefs one. Right, where he hangs a go ball up too much and my safety gets it and I can get him, right? Like you're looking at, there's going to be opportunities here against Purdy. There's going to be opportunities to force him to do something dumb and throw one across his body, and we can maybe take advantage of that. You go up against Mahomes and you're just trying not to die.
Yeah. I think the thing that's so interesting too is like I think that the It's not that the goalposts are different, Luke. I just think that it's like the rubric is slightly different for the guys that have already proved it versus those who are in the presence or like presently proving it. I would put Tua and Purdy in that category of they're proving it right now, but I would put Matthew Stafford in the has already proved something in terms of what his value is, what the top of his game is, what the bottom of his game is, stuff like that. So like Stafford, who's number 4 on the Locked On NFL scouting list, is a guy that also had an inconsistent stretch run in each of the last 2 seasons, but he's still widely considered a top 10 and even in this case a top 5.
He's done it at such scale with all of his years in the Lions that we all see what he is.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think like so for anybody that's wondering, well, why are you asking for consistency with Tua? Why are you asking for consistency with Purdy, but you're not asking for consistency with Stafford? It's because of the consistency has already been proven in many, many years in the NFL when it comes to Stafford in a way that it hasn't yet been proven with Tua and Purdy. That's not their fault. That is just how time works, unfortunately. And so I think that like that's really all that it is. I think with more time,
NFL, where we explain clocks.
Clock and calendar. So I just wanted to highlight that like I think that the criteria is slightly different for the guys that are in the process of proving it versus those that already have at a different capacity. And that's why like consistency thing becomes an important piece. I would say the same thing when I look at Joe Burrow, who missed the majority of last year or a great portion of last year with injury, and Anthony Richardson, who missed a great portion of last year with injury. One of them has proven it before. The other one still has something to prove.
They've laid a foundation that we can trust.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think once Purdy and Tua do that, it's going to be hard to keep them out of top 10 conversation if what we can trust and what that consistency looks like, what some of the top of their game has looked like in recent years.
Yeah, and with all of these guys that we've mentioned, from Tua to Geno Smith to Richardson and all these guys, I don't think you are asking for a miracle to see what we've been asking for to put them on this list, right? Like you're not asking for them to do anything that we haven't seen them be capable of doing. It's just a matter of sustaining it. Which I think should give Dolphins fans some comfort, especially.
I think so.
With all of the insane Tua Tagovailoa discourse, right? Like, we have seen it from him. We just want more. Just don't let it fall away. Don't let it be a flash in the pan. That's all we ask.
Yeah. And I don't think that Tua not being as strong out of structure than he is in structure is an issue. Because I would say, I mean, we just talked about how like CJ Stroud being really good at the boring stuff, quote unquote, boring stuff, but also having a little bit of that outside of structure improv stuff, that the improv stuff isn't as important to us as what he does in a snap, drop back, operate an offense, everything's going the way that you want it to go type of a situation. I would say the same thing for Tua. And so I don't hold him not being Brock Purdy outside of structure against him. I just think that that's an extra element of Brock Purdy's game that's super exciting, but you know, the consistency of it all is really the thing that matters the most going into all this. I think these are all guys that are on the brink of this top 10. Like it's not, like you said, it's not going to be a huge hurdle for them to get into this conversation. It's just does somebody, the biggest hurdle is does somebody else drop out of a top 10 if we're accepting this ranking as like what it is going into 2024.
And we haven't discussed them at all, but we probably see a rookie. Whether it's Caleb Williams or Daniels, or even if it's like a surprise JJ McCarthy, at some point we probably see a rookie, and we're having the Stroud Richardson conversation about them this time last year or next year.
Yep. Really, really good point. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, and no offense to JJ McCarthy or the Minnesota Vikings, but I'm hoping it's Jaden Daniels for, go Tigers.
Okay, that's fair. I'll give you that. I have no stake in the Commanders one way or another. I could see them. Their fans are kind of like Texans fans to me. We're like, yeah, they deserve to be happy for a second.
I just wish they had a better offensive line. I think they have the worst offensive line in football, and that's not great for a rookie.
That's so bad for that team's legacy.
Yeah.
What happened to the Hogs?
That was their whole thing. That was the calling card for a little while. Outside of all the problematics and lawsuits, outside of that. That's the thing that they used to be known for. Coming up next, before I'll cut myself off there, we're going to take a look at our yike and our like, what we liked, what we didn't like from the week before, leading off with T. Higgins effectively getting exactly what it is that he was looking for. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's Locked On NFL episode is brought to you by Gametime. It's the best place to find last-minute tickets to anything, whether it's a baseball game or whether you're trying to find tickets to upcoming NFL games, your favorite team's home opener, or maybe an international game if you're trying to get that. Check out Gametime. They have all kinds of flash sales going on all the time. You can save up to 60% off if you buy those tickets last minute with Gametime, by the way. And their whole thing is set up to help you find those last-minute deals with people just trying to get rid of their tickets, and they're going to take whatever price. You can save a ton of money doing that. So go check that out. You can get a panoramic seat view so you know you're satisfied with where you're sitting, and all in upfront pricing. So you know exactly what you're paying up front, no hidden fees. Go to the Gametime app, download it there, and you can use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off of your first purchase at the Gametime app. Terms apply.
All right, everybody, continuing on and wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL with our yike and our like, what we liked, what we didn't like from the week before. I'm going to dive right into my like here, and it's going to sound weird, but this is my like. Cincinnati Bengals and wide receiver T. Higgins did not reach a long-term extension from that salary cap on the deadline on Monday. So the idea was that if they wanted to get a long-term deal done, that it would have to get done by the 15th, and that didn't get done. That's not surprising. That's effectively what we all assumed from the moment that they gave him the franchise tag. But I'm glad for T. Higgins in this situation because so far, so good. This has worked out exactly the way that he was looking. This gives him an opportunity to become a free agent next year after a season where we saw wide receiver contracts skyrocket. So he's already in position to make more money next year than he would have made this year, theoretically, assuming he has a decent season. Obviously, we have to factor in injuries. We have to factor in health, but that's true for everyone across the board at all times. But I think so far this has worked out for T. Higgins. My one caveat that almost made me not make this alike is that if he has too good a season, the Cincinnati Bengals could conceivably franchise tag him again, but boy, that would be a hefty franchise tag. Like, there's no way that that's happening, right? Like,
no way in the same offseason where they're trying to pay Jamar Chase.
Yes, exactly,
they're going to let somebody else do that, and they're going to say, "Ooh, better comp pick." But the Bengals, they're not spending that money. No,
they're not going to spend that much. There's no. It's like $26 million, like, to do that. No way they're going to do it.
Absolutely.
So I think I'm safe in saying, like, okay, this has worked out so far the way that T. Higgins was effectively hoping. Now all he's got to do is have a decent 2024, a good 2024, a great 2024, and not get hurt. Now, easier said than done, but so far the plan is what he expected. He got everything he asked for except for the trade, basically.
Yeah, he's going to be fine. He's going to do one more year in Cincinnati. He's going to hit free agency. But yeah, this is going to be could be a very lucrative year for him, but of course he's risking, like, if he gets hurt, that messes everything up. So he's taking a big risk there. But yeah, you bet on yourself, right? I guess that's what makes it a like.
Yep.
I'm gonna go into my yike first, which is more of a general thing. This is from a Dan Le Batard show spot that got a bunch of attention through awful announcing of Pablo Torre, essentially complaining that we use too much jargon and the discourse around that. But I think there has been a grander trend of people just being really proudly ignorant in sports. And I get, like, some people want to turn their brain off and watch basketball and listen to the suits and talking heads yell at you. We do offer you a little more here at Locked On. So I think if you're here, then you want something more. But I don't have a lot of patience for people who both want to proudly not know anything and loudly state their opinions. If you want to turn your brain off and you don't want football or sports to feel like homework, I feel you. Go ahead, but shut up, because you don't have anything good to say if you also don't want to learn and improve yourself. I think it is a valiant thing to want to be a better and more informed consumer of sports. Now, if you can just, like, rattle off a whole bunch of buzzwords and pretend you sound smart, yeah, you're a fraudster. And I think most people can see past that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's pretty transparent.
I think you should want to look for the answers to questions rather than just complain that you have them.
That's really nice. That's good. Yeah, I think that, like, first of all, I think jargon is just a point of having a profession. Like, That's
yeah.
That's
Also, yeah, jargon is a word for you used. You referenced a concept that I don't know, and now I'm uncomfortable about it. Which is like, well, you're just complaining about that, or you could get to know what the concept is. Like with the video game coming out, and the you can do a bunch of stuff with the protections that you didn't used to be able to do, and that's really cool. And then there are people complaining that now they have to think too hard, and it's like, well, don't do that part then. Be bad at the game. It's a skill issue. Be better. Try to challenge yourself for once in your life.
Yeah. I can't think, like, you and I could probably sit here and talk not football, but we could probably talk like entertainment industry. And you and I will have an entirely different vocabulary than some other people that we know and everything like that. And I think that's just typical of being involved in something. But I do agree what you said there about doing it to make yourself feel smart versus doing it to help make others smart, help educate other people. There's a big time difference there, but it's really, really easy to tell the difference between the two of those things. So yeah, come here for jargon, but we promise you'll leave knowing what the jargon means. That's for sure.
Hold yourself to a higher standard today. It'll be okay. You'll be glad you did.
Yeah, it'll be good. I'll go with my my yike. I'll try to be quick about this because I'm sure you've been dealing with this all week. But look, the Jordan Addison thing is just wild, man. Like you have this whole situation happen with the unfortunate death of Kyrie Jackson, and it being tied to or not tied to, but being the cause of a drunk driver. And then a week later, you're arrested at a DUI, arrested for a suspicion of a DUI and all these other things. And then a couple of days after that, you're on social media posting drinks and things like that. Like, just a little bit of sensitivity. I mean, they never hurt nobody. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels like it's just so ignorant to what's going on around you and really, really unfortunate. And so I hope that gets handled. I hope that gets settled. Luke, I'm not going to make you talk about it. I know you're having to deal with this all the time, but my goodness.
I'm waiting for more details to really like.
We should say that too.
Because there's a lot of other contexts when it comes to
right.
Yeah, alleged and all that. There's a lot of other contexts when it comes to covering the Vikings and questions that people are going to have about like a suspension and stuff that aren't really answerable yet. So I'm deciding to be right instead of first.
Yes, smart. But this news cycle around this and the overall action, leave alone the football consequence of it all, but the overall action just feels a little gross. Yeah, that's for sure. All right, what about your like?
Don't drink and drive. You don't need to know what's true or not about those particular cases for that to be good advice. Don't drink and drive. My like of the week is the video game that everybody's going crazy over. The EA Sports College Football 25 has released in the middle of this recording. I've been very excited to play it. I'm going to go take the Minnesota Golden Gophers back to the promised land and to the days of glory. We will not be passing the ball at my program. And we will be playing through injuries so much. I'm going to just send them out with ice packs like it's that one image of Ben Roethlisberger. We are going to have a toxic program with maulers. We're going to beat you up. We're going to win every single game 20-0. We're going to have 4 possessions a team. We're going to go 13-0. And I'm not going to wait any longer to start doing that. So good luck.
Oh, okay. All right. See you, Luke. There he goes. He's gone. All right. Well, I guess we're done here. We appreciate you very much for joining us for another episode of Locked On NFL. Don't forget, you'll have James and Chris tomorrow answering the biggest questions around the National Football League. And of course, maybe Luke will be back on Tuesday. We'll see if I can get in touch with him again. Luke? No, I think he's gone. All right, y'all. We appreciate you. We thank you very much for joining us for another episode of Locked On NFL, making us your first listen and for being everydayers here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.